Welcome to another week of Tower Race. And then this week we've got the very lovely...
Oh.
Yeah, that's the word I'm going to choose to use.
That's a nice word.
Taylor Ford.
Yes, thank you, Jono. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for all the lovely listeners at home that don't know you?
Sure. So, Taylor Ford. I'm from Penguin, little old Penguin, down the northwest coast. I'm the youth pastor and associate pastor, so I'm like a few, just not quite as good as Jono. I'm the Jono version, but not as good at Penguin.
Who's this guy?
And I've been doing full-time ministry for over 10 years now, and I, Jono, as you know, and Sharon, cut a lot of my teeth here at the Tower Race, which, as we were reflecting before, were some of the greatest times that I've had in ministry.
You're my brother.
Yeah, I lived with you guys for 2 years and we had all sorts of fun. But yeah, youth pastor a lot. I'm sort of transitioning out of that into the associate pastor role and all the elements of what that means. And obviously coronavirus has made everything very different as well. So my role's forever changing in that. But absolutely loving ministry, but also had my my moments of not loving ministry as well. But I can't imagine doing anything else.
And you're a daddy.
Yeah. I'm a dad times two, yep. So Hunter's he's nearly 2 now, and Ryder, I think, is nearly 10 weeks.
Yeah, so you had him during COVID time.
Yeah.
That's
So just
nuts.
as it kicked off. And
as it kicked off in Burnie too.
Yes, that's right. As it was getting really serious on the northwest coast, and specifically Burnie, that's when it happened. And he was born in the Burnie hospital. So we had to quarantine as we left hospital.
Yeah.
It was a really weird time to have a baby. It was kind of like almost bittersweet.
Yeah.
Because you knew the hospital was somewhere that was safe, but it didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a weird time.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Big time. And what do you do in your spare time, mate?
Yes. I, Jono, am heavily involved in the motorsport world and in drifting. And that's been a big passion of mine.
Surely God doesn't like drifting.
Well, look, some could argue that, but I think he's opened plenty of doors for me to do that. In fact, I used to drive my drift car to Tower Race and had to park it down the bottom of your driveway, Sharon, because I couldn't get it up your driveway.
I know.
Is that a sore spot? I never really asked about that.
Not a sore spot at all.
Okay, good. I love drifting, and it's one of my biggest passions outside of what I do within church. And for me, it's a real sort of way that I can turn off. Like I can go into the shed and work on my car. And also, I just meet a lot of amazing people outside of the church. And I think for me, it's a real great way to still mix with non-churched people.
Yeah.
That's
That's
awesome.
cool. That's awesome.
Well, we're really excited to have you here, Taylor. So what we're doing here is we're midway through a bit of a series where we're just sitting down having a real conversation with real language, where we're just trying to work out what this thing called love demands of us and asks of us, because it's the conversation everyone cares most about, but we find that it's probably the hardest thing that we'll ever have to do.
Sure.
And so what we're finding is we talk about it, everyone's got a different definition of what love might look like. And so what we thought we'd do is we'd go back to the words of Jesus to sort of get a bit of a better understanding about it.
Yeah.
Is that fair, Shaz?
Yeah. So you've got the Bible reading
I
there.
do. So we're going to move on to the next part of this conversation that Jesus started. And it's Matthew 5 from 17 to 20. So I'll just read that out now. He says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you'll certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." So there's a little bit of a tongue twister, that one, because he sort of plays off this theme of the kingdom of heaven a few different times.
Yeah.
But just general observations, what were the first thoughts that came to your mind, either of you, as I read that?
I guess he's kind of saying that just following rules and regulations isn't enough.
Yeah.
He's after an inner transformation, I think. I think that's what he's kind of saying. He's saying just because you go to church or you wear the right robes or you know the books of the Bible, you know your content, if that's all you're doing, it's really not going to cut it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's after something else that's happening.
Something a bit deeper.
And even how he's saying he's come to fulfill it, like we couldn't.
Yeah.
We could never get there. We could never fulfill all the Old Testament laws. Yeah. And he's saying, I have a relationship with me and I will fulfill them. And then that will, exactly what you're saying, Sharon, grant you access to that relationship, which is awesome because I know I stuff up all the time.
No.
I know, right? But my access to him, to God, is through Jesus and through him fulfilling that stuff, which is impossible without that.
Yeah, that's good. I think the bit that stands out to me is when we look at it in the context of what he says before and after this, is Jesus is saying there's this law, this whole, like, you know, how many people think of Christianity as just a series of rules and laws and all this sort of stuff. So Jesus is saying you can take all of that, and then what he goes on to explain in the following chapters is that alone actually doesn't quite cut it. Like he actually extrematizes the law or the rules and says that his way of love is actually so much greater than all of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he's actually almost setting these religious leaders up to saying, if you want access to God, or if you want to follow this way of love only through fulfilling the law, you're going to have a really hard time doing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a lot of joy there either.
No, that's right. I agree. And when he goes into, without going into your next passages, when he's talking about these laws and he lists them, and he says, but there's actually, it's not just that. It's what's happening on the inside that's what is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really a great passage.
Yeah.
So growing up, you didn't do the church thing, did you?
Not at all.
You didn't do the religion thing at all. And were you attracted to it at all?
No. Well, in reflecting, I think I actually was attracted to Christianity.
Okay.
But I only knew at the time Christianity as deep Catholic religion because I went to a Catholic primary school and a Catholic high school. But I think, just like all of us, there was always something inside me that longed for more. Mm-hmm. But I could never pinpoint what that was, and a whole bunch of things I tried to fulfill that with. But yeah, certainly was never attracted to religion. And if I'm honest, still even as an adult, I'm not overly attracted to religion. There's some parts that I really appreciate about religion, and after learning about, you know, what that even means. But yeah, as a young guy in high school and going to Catholic Catholic schools, all I ever heard was rules and you know, you can't do this, you can't do that, and it just seemed so stale. As I've grown in my faith, and I've actually taken a lot from the Catholic Church, and some of their stuff is beautiful, so I don't want to be like bad-mouthing them, but as a teenager...
And as someone that didn't grow up in a family of faith...
Yeah, that's right. It was just, to me, it was just the anti-fun. The anti of anything that I wanted to do, and so it was just repulsive almost.
You were that stereotypical
100%
delinquent youth, disengaged youth that was rebellious, that didn't like the rules, that thought that whole way of life was just stupid and boring. Yeah,
I just thought the way that I seen faith and religion was that it was almost a selling of your soul. Okay. You give up, you give yourself to this, and you almost lose anything that's you would deem as fun, which is ironic because my favourite Bible verse is, you know, if you give your life, you'll receive it. Yeah. And so, I mean, the Bible's full of them parallels, but yeah, I really felt like to enter into that, I would have to give up, and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, so even to be curious, you felt frightened or fear.
Yeah. Because
you felt that you might have got caught in something that there was no way out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And like Jono said, growing up in a non-Christian family, everything I knew about faith was basically just the stereotypes. Yeah. And I never had it told to me that it could be done differently. And I'd never seen it being done different. I had no experience of that. None of my friends went to church. None of my family members that I knew of went to church. And so all I knew was the stereotypes and the negative aspects of religion.
And Australia is very good at teaching children to say no, to even being curious with their spiritual self.
Yeah, because like I said, I think there were parts of me that were really curious about spirituality, and I always, I think, knew that there had to be something more. Yeah. But I probably... it was maybe a maturity thing. I never actually realised that they could be the same thing, that faith and religion could actually be that thing that I was looking for. Because in my mind, it just wasn't that.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It never could have been that, because all I knew was, like I said, religion and rules.
So you went searching for that stuff elsewhere, didn't you?
Yeah, in high school, I just so desperately wanted to be accepted, like most young people do.
Yeah.
And that just led me to essentially getting my self-worth from making people either laugh, from making people want to, like, being my friends, or even, and I'm not overly proud of it, but even like intimidating people. A lot of my high school career,
Your bullying career,
my bullying career, and but the interesting thing is, and it doesn't at all make it right, but I basically only ever bullied bullies.
Yeah, okay.
And so there was always this thing
Robin
inside.
Hood.
Yeah. There was always this thing inside of me that just hated injustice. I hated the fact that people were being treated wrong. And I think that is linked to some of the stuff that I was searching for, that there's got to be more than this. And so, school was not great for me, though. Spent a lot of times in fights, being suspended. And I remember being in the principal's office with the police, and but I yearned for connection, and I was looking for something that I just couldn't find in any other way. And the parties and the girls and all that sort of stuff was a big part of that as well.
So what happened?
Yeah, it's a great question. and I think about that question, I still don't think I fully understand what happened. Like, I still think it's just such a mystery to it. And it's almost like a dominoes thing. There was just a few things, just one after the other, that just lined up. Because I think of people that sort of walked my journey, and I'll say a little bit of that, but they're not here anymore. And so, it was the same. I experienced the same physical things as what they experienced, but something else didn't click. So I always find that really interesting, because I wish I knew the formula, because as a youth pastor, I would just love to be able to recreate that formula. But I got a job. I left school. I got a job. Well, previous to that, I fell in a fire, which was a big part of my story, and it really... I think it sped up my maturity as a teenager. It forced me to ask myself some pretty serious questions.
Pain does that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. But it forced me to ask myself, who do I want to be?
Yeah.
And what sort of life do I want to live?
Wow.
And then so I left school. I get a job as a builder, and my boss invites me to church. He's starting a church. And I'm thinking all them religious thoughts, rules, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I just, in my head, was just pews and a priest with the collar and, all that sort of stuff. And so I really didn't want to go. And like the joke that I often say is I mostly went because his daughter was hot. and so I'm like, well...
That's the formula.
That's the formula, flirt to convert. So I went along and I convinced my brother to come with me, because I was way too scared to go by myself.
Which is quite funny, isn't it? Seeing as how you were good with your fists.
Yeah, that's right. Let's go punch up in church. But I actually can't remember much of the first few times that I went to church. I certainly didn't have like a big God encounter and fall to my knees and repent and, have like a big goosebump moment. It was nothing like that. But there was obviously something that just drew me back. And I joke saying, that my boss's daughter, and that, there is a reality to that. That probably did keep me coming back. But I found what I could sense as a little bit of belonging. But the irony is, and I don't know, I probably have told you this, Sharon, it wasn't long after coming to church, Sir John and Louisa, the senior pastors, invited me to a youth event here in what was the rowing shed at the time. And I convinced my brother to come, and we all piled in the Tarago with a bunch of other young guys that I hardly knew. I remember coming here and sitting on some couches, seeing Dylan doing a Star Wars rap. He might have even been doing it with Mikey, I can't remember. And that was one of the first times when I actually seen like young people having fun, and it was linked to what I knew was religion at the time. And I was so curious about that. And then there were some Hillsong students that sort of did a little message, and they did an altar call. and my brother wanted to go up, and I didn't even want to go. Like, I was like, no, why would I do that? And they said, you can go up. So they said, if you don't want to go up by yourself, you can bring someone with you. And so I said to my little brother, I was like, all right, I'll go with you. And so I basically accepted Jesus by default. I might need to do it again. I might even in. But I went up because he wanted someone to go with him. And we, stood up the front and we said the sinner's prayer. And I remember I got given a Hillsong CD and a paperback Bible. And I wore both of them out in the next few months of that. Like, I just listened to that CD like on repeat, and I just would read this New Testament. And I at the time was working with these two builders that were phenomenal men of God, but super religious.
Okay.
And so I learned a lot from them. And I remember in my family, a very common word to use in a conversation was Jesus, but not in the context of Jesus. Yeah. And I would say it all the time, oh, Jesus Christ. And looking back at it now, they just must have been cringing, and I was killing them inside. And one day my boss said to me, he's like, that's like, it's kind of offensive to us, Taylor. And then that's when I started, really thinking about, like, even just our words and how we express faith and all that sort of stuff. And so, I learned a lot from them guys, and no one in my family was allowed to say that anymore. And anyway, there's a long answer to your question, but I stumbled into faith. I most certainly didn't go looking for it. I got a job and I got invited to church, and I seen people that were experiencing Jesus. And I dipped my toe, and then I went to my ankle, and then I went to my knee. I can't actually think of a moment where it was like all in. It was just a progression of time in discovering that.
It sounds like, though, that some Christians who are trying to live authentically but be themselves.
100%.
And probably... not religious, but just trying to live. Yeah. It kind of sparked a curiosity for you to step out of a cultural stereotype and kind of go, oh, maybe I've actually been judgmental, maybe I've been critical, maybe I haven't actually even opened myself up to being curious and asking.
Maybe I've been lazy.
I've just put them in a box because that's what our culture says. That's 100%. The box they go in, and there's no variation on the box.
It's so true. And as now on the flip side, I find one of the most exciting things about being a Christian and a youth pastor, and even like the drifting side of things, is trying to break that box for people. Yeah. Because it is such a huge part of our culture. Yeah. Is that box. But I had people like yourself and Tim, Jono, Mikey, Dylan, so some of my peers, and even John and Louisa, that I could just ask questions to, and that they wouldn't be offended, but they would talk me through what that means to them. Yeah. Like, I remember Louisa one time telling me about what a youth ministry was and what the Holy Spirit was. And I remember at the end of the conversation saying to her, can I have both? Like, because I didn't know what them things were. Yeah. Like, I never knew there was such thing as a youth ministry. I didn't even know what the Holy Spirit was. And she explained them to me, and like, they're so different to one another. But I remember just going, well, can I have both of them things? Like, can we start a youth ministry? Can I have the Holy Spirit? Like, how does that work? Because exactly like you said, Sharon, I just knew what was in that little box, and no one had ever told me, or I had never been open to it. People might have tried, who knows, but I certainly can't remember.
Within the faith, do you feel this pressure to conform? Do you feel this pressure to kind of not be yourself and to do that walk with Jesus? And Jesus is quite unique the way he takes us on those journeys. But do you feel this pressure that now I've actually got to conform and become a little bit more religious, a little bit more
100%.
Of what I suppose mainstream Christianity expects you to look like and sound like and be like?
I think I daily wrestle with that. Yeah. And in my younger years, I think, or even now, I think sometimes I could be perceived as being like this rebel that's going against what a good Christian should do, should say, should be. But I think internally it's actually just that battle between wanting to be authentic and and not carry that religious stigma with it. But I do find myself often getting caught up in religion. And I have to check myself. Like, I'll often, and like just being vulnerable, I'll often get a little bit judgy and be like, oh, that person hasn't been at church for ages. Like, what's going on with their faith? But as people that pastors, we want people to be in church all the time. But we also know that doesn't necessarily mean that their faith's not strong.
Well, sometimes they just need space to work through the pain of whatever they've got because it's too noisy.
Exactly.
They just need solitude.
But as a pastor, there's this part of me that's like, why aren't you in church?
Yeah.
You should be in church. You're supposed to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And I think as I've grown and matured and I'm very much on a journey of discovering myself and my own flaws, I'm trying my best to be more open to the Holy Spirit to almost like refine me in like in a fire sense, like to burn off them sharp edges. But yeah, I do think I struggle with that idea of people not understanding my journey because often I don't think I fit that mould.
That box.
Yeah.
That's all right. Jesus didn't know.
No, that's right.
whole
He
thing.
didn't. He didn't at all. But in our Christian circles, we kind of forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
Well,
and sometimes
from my
I think each generation has its own religion in a sense.
Yeah,
For sure.
In my generation, it was around sexuality and language.
Yeah.
And if you didn't conform within those two parameters, then there's no way you could have faith if you expressed a certain kind of language or, whereas that denied all the other ways in which it's the essence of faith, which is how we love one another and how we love God.
Yeah.
And looking at what's happening internally, not just the external thing.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's kind of like you haven't arrived until you tick the box. So the language is now always a certain type of language, or the dress code's now always a certain dress code, or rather than, okay, well, how loving's that person? What's happening on the inside? Are they not gossiping as much as they used to? Or are they, asking for forgiveness, when there's a relational breakdown? How fast are they running towards reconciliation and trying to understand one another? Which I think are the harder things to do than all that surface stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a constant struggle. I get that.
Yeah. And being, I think, a younger leader has its challenges with that as well, because we're cut from a different cloth.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I feel that tension often. And I don't know if I have to check within my heart if it's a proud thing, but there is a part of me that just wants to rebel sometimes.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, like I want to push that boundary.
I've experienced that myself at times.
But then often it'll leave me feeling bad. Should I be doing that? But then there's just this part of me that's like, stuff it, Taylor, don't worry about it. Just go for it, do it, say it.
Yeah.
And some of my friends that I've had conversations with, I think that some of my friends that I've had the best faith-based conversations that are far away from Jesus, and that's been what they've appreciated about me the most. And so that's where I find the tension. Am I living my faith out for the people that are further away, or am I living my faith out for the people that are in our church? And I want to do it for both, but they kind of both need a different version of me.
Yeah.
Do you find that tension?
Yeah, big time. Absolutely.
Yeah. How does it work for you?
Well, I think you made an interesting comment before, so I might start there, about how your generation religion was expressed through what you said and what your sexuality did and how you portrayed those to the world around you. I think I'd be interested to see what you think, Taylor. I think our generation cares about how inclusive you are of people groups or whatever it is, or whatever minority it is, and how sustainable you like to do things, like how you treat the planet and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think, well, first of all, do you agree with those?
I do. Yeah. I do. And one of the things that I find so interesting is I think that the younger generation don't get that you can actually disagree with someone but still like them. with a lot of them things. Like we don't have to actually agree on everything, but we can still be great friends. And we don't have to be enemies.
Oh, I think that's a tension with my generation too. Because if you used a certain language, you weren't supposed to hang around with them, or if your sexuality wasn't a certain, you weren't supposed to hang around with those kinds of people. So you had a lot of movement from church to church as people tried to find their crowds, the people that sounded like them, talked like them, believed like them, rather than the beauty of your generation where you're trying to embrace diversity and you're kind of going, well, we're all on a journey and let's walk the journey out. Yeah, but there's been, I mean, in my experience, that concept that you can disagree and still be best of mates and love one another is foreign.
But I think coming back to your question, then also the text that Jesus was talking about, I think the tension is really about what motivates. Like, because we're all on this journey of trying to change or trying to become more loving or better people, I suppose.
It's the heart.
Yeah.
Becoming more like Christ.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's always that pressure of people to become religious, almost like what the Pharisees were like, where it's about ticking those boxes like what you're talking about. So we can either be forced into life change because of those things, which never really works. Like you just look at kids that rebel and all this sort of stuff to see that just doesn't work. But then Jesus sort of stepped in and he kind of says, I've come to fulfill the law. And then he goes on to talk about unless your righteousness surpasses the Pharisees who ticked all the boxes, it doesn't even matter. And so what Jesus was saying was, instead of being motivated by the peer pressure of the Christian crowd and of the laws and the rules and all this sort of stuff, live a life of love where you're trying to draw nearer to me.
That's so good.
And so that's what I constantly have to keep coming back to and reminding myself, is that this way of love that Jesus is talking about is only found and only walked through that relationship with him. He was the fulfillment of all those rules and all those laws. So rather than having to go through and obey all 600 odd laws or whatever it is, if I simply love God, love others, as he defines it, like that's as close as what I can get to it.
You're a long way there.
But it's flipping hard.
It is.
It
is.
But it creates life change, and that's the thing that is exciting. It's that proximity to this guy called Jesus and the love as he defined it, because it's so much more than just the way that the rules and the laws spell it out.
For sure.
Like the rules and the laws, they try to describe what love would do, but they can't fully capture love.
No.
And so in the end, they become devoid of love. And so...
like the intention's there for the love, but it doesn't get... it's on its own, it can't get you there.
Next week, it's about murder. Like if you've got... obviously, murdering someone's not loving. But simply just having that anger in your heart and not murdering is also not loving.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but anyway, that's a little sneak peek.
For next week. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, look, I had a conversation with a young guy this week that I've known, that I've sort of done discipleship with for 8 years, and he's just grown phenomenally. And he came to me and he's like, I want to have a break. And it broke my heart. I cried like a girl.
Like a little baby.
Like a little baby girl.
Little baby Taylor.
But I said to him, I said, you can dump church, you can dump youth, you can dump whatever. But I just pleaded with him not to jump Jesus out of his heart. Because it's easy, like you're saying, Jono, to fall into the trap of ticking boxes and you think that's enough. But you could, and we've probably all had that in our life where we have tick boxes and we still haven't felt like we're getting what we need. So yeah, I think it's so good what you're talking about, Jono.
That's good.
What do you think?
Oh, I just think it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
It is.
It's really easy to move into rules, regulations, tradition, as opposed to, how's my heart?
Yeah.
Where's my heart? How soft is it towards God? How soft is it towards people? That kind of thing.
Have you found any specific ways to make it easy to have them checks in your life?
Oh, I suppose whilst we've been talking the last few weeks about globalisation and the racist stuff, for me, I've been very quiet. I suppose in my own soul, listening, because I want to try and understand what it means for a black person to experience racism, and I want to understand what that actually means. So sometimes it's just being quiet and reflective and listening. listening to God, listening to people, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's really good.
It's creating that enough solitude, I think, in your life to be able to have an honest look at what it is that you need to dump, get rid of, change, grow. And some
really
things
good.
are just too big. Like some things are just a mystery to me, and I just kind of go, I can't deal with that. I'm just Shaz. I don't know how to deal with that. So I'm just not even going to go there. I'm just going to try and love the person because I can't figure that one out. It's just too hard.
Yeah.
That's all I can do.
But like, if I'm allowed to ask a
Go.
question, because
Keep going.
I think you're phenomenal, Sharon, and you've been a pastor for a long time. Have you seen that trend of people that have come into faith and been like on fire and like what we're sort of talking about, like a little bit rebellious and wanting to discover things, and then slipping into just comfortable religion, like ticking boxes? Is that like a common thing that you see within the church?
Probably not.
Oh, that's good. Oh. Yeah, no, that's great.
Mainly because I think, and this is the sad part, is because I think that a lot of people who are in the church are ticking the boxes.
Yeah.
And they've never been rebellious.
Yeah.
So they've never wanted to step outside.
Sure.
They've never wanted to question or think and that's what I'm excited about your generation, and it's specifically the type of ministries you two are both involved in, because you're kind of presenting the Jesus talk to kids who have bought into the stereotype of Australia. You know, you don't consider Christianity, you don't be curious about it.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's in this box. You don't want to get in that box because then you're going to have a boring life.
Yeah.
But you're trying to sort of shake that box a little bit with the Australians, but at the same time you're also shaking the box for all those who are ticking the stuff and kind of going, this is what it's like, and you're kind of going, well, no, it doesn't have to look like that either. There's a box. If you want to put a box, which I hope we don't, but there's a place in the middle for both groups to come together and for both. I mean, I often talk about our teen years as being wild good because we're actually created with this wildness, this rebellion, this desire for something bigger and greater. Yeah. And that can either be bad or that can be good. And I just kind of go, in that space in the middle, there's all this creativity that we can actually step into.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But I think that's hard. I think it's hard to live in that space. And I think it's either easy to go to the Australian stereotype box, which says religion's boring, or to become boring and just become religious. I don't think it's easy to live in the middle.
And it never, that boringness of Christianity is not attractive.
No.
It is so not attractive. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's been a good discussion.
It's been very good. Just thinking about our church community here, just one final thought. Some of them champion us so well.
They do.
And they don't always get what we try to do. Do you know what I mean?
And they don't always agree with what you do.
That's what I'm getting at, but they still find grace enough to say, just go for it anyway and try, rebel, have a go at doing that wild thing, and we'll just pray and hope and push you in hope that it's good.
Yeah.
But
Which is very gracious.
Do you have any final thoughts, either of you guys, just for any of our viewers at home, about how they can either discover more of this way that we're talking about, or help others to be able to discover that there's not necessarily there's this third space, this space which is full of life and full of colour, and it doesn't have to be that grey, dreary Christianity that the world thinks of.
I think for me, it's just ask lots of questions.
Yeah,
Don't accept the status quo. Ask lots of questions, whether you're in society or whether you're in church community. Ask. Just be a pain. Ask the questions. Be curious. You know, be curious about life and the mystery of life, and just step into that, and then have a go at some things that maybe you wouldn't normally have a go at. I don't know, just try some different things, be experiential in it.
Yeah.
You know, try and pray a prayer if you need to,
Yeah.
or maybe if you're a Pentecostal Christian, why don't you try a liturgical practice
Yes.
for a change?
That's right. Yeah.
Just try different things.
Yeah.
Add
because,
some colour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
add some colour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying before at the start. Like, I think in my later years, I've really appreciated some of the more contemplative sides of Christianity that I think the Catholic Church do so well. Like, I sort of stumbled into faith in a more Pentecostal way,
Yeah.
but I'm now appreciating so much of them, the silence.
Yeah.
And it's actually really hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. It's way easier
Especially when you're a chatty person.
Yeah, that's right. It's way easier to jump up and down and worship than sit and contemplate and that. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you've said, Sharon. Ask questions, but surround yourself with people that are okay with that tension of them, you know, almost playing the devil's advocate. But a person, a really great mentor in my life when I was first discovering Christianity, said to me, find someone that's just a few steps ahead of you that is just modelling what, like, sort of the aspects of faith that you just really admire, and just chase after them. And and I've said this to you before, John.
You have, mate.
But that was you. Like, that was you in my life. I was like, that guy, he's got what I want. He's friendly, he's kind, he's cool,
What
he's
happened
fun.
to him?
No, it's still all there. But it set me up so well. I feel emotional talking about it. It set me up so well to pursue, like, because it was tangible. Like, I could see how you reacted and how you talked to people and how you invited and and then I most certainly don't think that I've surpassed you, but I certainly got to a point in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm
absolutely.
I've leveled up now.
Yeah.
And then now, so, like, and I still consider you one of them people in my life, but now there's other greats that I'm like, how do I be a little bit
That's
more
great.
like that? Yeah.
Diversity.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And really, that's coming back to this whole text about Jesus, which is all about that relationship rather than that law.
Yeah.
And it's chasing that relationship. We're going for a long time, so we might just leave it on that point, I think. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us, buddy.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
I might ask you to pray for us
love
and the
to.
people watching from home,
Sure.
wherever they might be, and then we might close out from there.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. God, we just thank you for your word. We thank you that it just highlights the relationship aspect, that you so want us to fall madly in love with you, that you want us to do life with you, that rules and religion is not the end, but they were a means to coming into relationship with what was behind that, God. And so we just thank you that questions are okay. We thank you that we can actually question religion and faith and these things that we're wrestling with, and you don't fall less in love with us, God. You don't reject us, but you love our questions, in fact, and you love doing the dialogue with us, God. And so I pray as a church community that we would constantly bring our questions to you, God, and find the answers we're looking for. And if we can't find the answers, God, I just pray that, like Sharon was saying, that some of the things in life that we can just be okay with not knowing. But we love you, God. We love you back. We're so grateful that you fulfill the law so that we can come into relationship with you. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.